Okay, I know I've got some of y'all in here, or someone in here. Not quite sure who all's gonna be in here, but yeah. Let me go ahead and move it to this just for a second. Yeah. I'm live. I'm alive! But yeah. Wow, these new lights kind of really make me look old.
What are you doing in my lawn here? You want to get out of here. Yeah, you do.
Hello, Shinju. Fuzzbutt. Let me zoom out just a little bit. This is a bit too close. There we go. Yep, gotta say hi to the kitty. Alright, so I have 4 people watching already. Excellent. I guess I can go ahead and move on to the actual creation. Alright, what I'm doing is not just for making miniatures, sadly. This is actually going to be for my work, my paying work. And what you're seeing here on in the 3D Studio Max window is, well, it's a basic human-sized figure for the program I'm working in. It's obviously not a viable human figure, it's just there for scaling, for height. Now, I'm not certain if there's an actual, official size for these beasties. The dark young of Shub Nigarauth. So, I'm going to make it so that underneath its 3 legs, each of its 3 legs is going to be the height of a man. And then it's just going to have tentacles coming up, and a couple mouths around, and just, ooh, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So, what we do next is we go ahead and we decide what we're going to use as the basic shape for the body. And really, it could be a cylinder or a sphere. And I'm thinking a sphere would probably work best. So, I draw a sphere, and I want to draw it in the top viewport because, as you can see, it does its geometry as a latitude and longitude. Okay. Now, let's zoom out. However, that's too many polygons for what I'm doing, so let's just start lowering it down. That's too few. That's 12 should be good, mostly because what I'm doing is going to be trilaterally symmetrical. Yes, I used that word, trilaterally. And the next thing I do, I could make it 15. Oh, too much. 15. But again, that's, number one, it's not even, which means that the bottom and the top are no longer symmetrical. But go up to 18, that's too many. So 12 looks like it's going to be just about the right amount. And what we're going to do is we're going to first center it in X and Y. Yeah, and then let's bring it up. We want it to be a little bit stockier than this. So it's just gonna increase that radius. Yeah, that way all of the legs will end up being about the size of a person. So convert it to an editable poly. What that means is basically editable polygons. We selected all of these bottom ones, and we're going to shrink them a bit. Shrink them like this a little bit more. And then we're going to select all these, and we're going to add another spline down the middle. Now, we need to go ahead and make this have edged faces, because what we're going to do, we're going to make our legs from several of the polys of this bottom edge. To be exact, those four, and then we're going to turn, and on this side it's going to be these. Basically, it's going to have 3 large stump-like legs. Now, we don't need those selected right now, because what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to make them make the legs a bit more, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? A bit more circular. Don't want that. Now, the way we're going to do this is we're going to go ahead and enlarge these lower, and we're going to shrink the upper. And then we're going to select, let's go ahead and deselect that. We're going to deselect the ones that are not part of the bottom end of this. The reason being is because we want to shrink these 3 in proportion so that they're somewhat curved on the inside. And now our leg stump starts are a bit more rounded. Let's do one further thing. Let's select these 3. We're gonna enlarge them and bring them up a bit. That's a bit too much. Enlarge and bring them down. Yeah. Now we have 3 large stump areas selected, and that's where our legs are going to come from. This whole thing is going to be tricky because I've got to model the whole thing radially instead of being able to just work on half of it and mirror the other half. When I get to the tentacles, it might be a little bit easier, but for the legs, I can't do that. Now, we're going to extrude, and we're going to change it to local normal. Actually, no, we want it to be by group because we don't want it to get too large. Extrude down to about there, and then we're going to flatten them. Y0 scale. Once again, Y is up and down, unlike in 3D printing, for those of you who are 3D printer followers. We're going to shrink these just a little bit. And then we're going to select these 6 vertexes, because we want to make the front of each leg a little bit thicker than the back. We're going to increase their radial. We're going to deselect those, deselect those, deselect those. By selecting the edges, we can now make the entire front edge properly. Bring them in. And then we're going to extrude them again. This time not quite as far, but they're going to increase in size because these are stumpy legs. Stumpy, stumpy. Now while we're sitting here, we can go ahead and add in an extra pair of edge loops. The reason being is we want there to be a little bit more defined thigh area. Now, we select those once again and we extrude them down. And these are actually going to be slightly smaller individually and stick out a little bit further forward, because now we're going to select the fronts of each leg. No. Actually, yeah, I can select them from here. These are going to become the fronts of hooves, like cloven hooves. And what we're going to do is we're going to extrude out just a little. And make it by polygon instead of by group or by local normal. We're going to shrink them a little. And we're going to lower them so that they're on the ground. And then we're going to extrude them out quite a bit more. We're going to make them a bit smaller from the top. And we're going to lower them again. Now, we're going to select just those vertexes. Now, the way we do this, if we do a control click, when switching from selecting faces to selecting vertexes, it selects all the vertexes that were on the faces that we selected. We're going to bring those out. We're going to deselect the ones that are already on the bottom. And we're going to lower them a bit, because we want them to be a bit sharper. Now, right now it looks kind of goofy, because this is mostly just raw geometry that we're making here. So, the next thing we got to do is tentacles. Now, before we can do these tentacles, we need to go ahead and de-spherify part of this. It's still going to be radial, but it's not going to be as spherical. And we're going to shrink it a bit. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add in a radial on this that's kind of small. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to choose faces to become tentacles that will be waving up and out and blah, raggedy, raggedy, raggedy. So we're going to start. It's going to be every other polygon, so that the tentacles will end up being no. There's one thing I need to do first. I need to make 2 more inserts that are smack dab in the middle. You'll see why in just a minute. Ow. You'll see why in just a minute. Now, do I have those polygons selected? Yes. We're going to inset them just a little bit. What that inset does is it gives a little bit of space. It takes the polygon and it moves it in all directions the same distance. In this case, about 3.5 millimeters. And then, let's go ahead and what I was planning on doing, we want to deselect everything up here, deselect everything here. Oh, it didn't get the bottom ones. And deselect everything here. The end result is we only have selected the middle excuse me, the middle segments. We're gonna go ahead and grow the selection And now we have to deselect that again. Oh, yay. So, there. There. Reason being is we also want to select those edges that were selected there. Now we want to basically, we want to make these a little bit more rounded. So this. Now, you have them selected. We're going to extrude up. Group, not by polygon. And then shrink and make it more vertical. And that's too far, so we bring it down just a little. Now this is only 12 tentacles. Only 12 tentacles, he says. Your typical art for these things will have a lot more. Now we're going to grow and grow. We're going to make them a little bit bigger, diameter-wise, because we want to. Now shrink and shrink, we're back to just the tops. And now we're going to basically extrude them out way high, because the tentacles are huge. They're mostly tentacle. It's a little bit more. Okay, and now we shrink them by about 20% of what they are. So we hit F12, we get this nice little scale transform. I'm not actually certain if you can see the scale. Okay, you cannot see the scale transform. I'm sorry. And what we do is we select that to 20%. End result is that. Now, the thing is, we want these inner tentacles to be a lot taller than the outer. So we deselect the inner. We drag the outer down a bit. And let's turn off edge faces. Smooth 1. Collapse all. Z. Now, the next thing we do is we select this kind of center portion. This makes it look circular. We don't want it to, or spherical. We don't want it to be spherical. We want it to be more circular than spherical. And let's go ahead and make it a little bit stumpier. Yeah. And now we select all of those lines. What this is going to do, we're going to add in some edge loops so we can make the tentacles a little bit fatter. So we're going to add in 2 edge loops with a rather wide division, about 85. No, about 80. Yeah. And we're then going to select. You control select. Those are now the vertexes selected, and we're going to push them out. This is kind of like the inflate tool in ZBrush. It's just a bit more precise. Okay. And we're going to collapse it. And we're going to deselect the bottom ones. And we want to just have those top selected, and we're going to push them. Our tentacles are a lot thicker now. Collapse. No. Collapse all. Then we're going to add one more kind of central. And we're going to push that to make it a bit more rounded in nature. collapse all. Now, we have one more thing that we need to do. We need to add in a lot more segments to these tentacles because they're going to be articulated. If they were just sticking straight out, hey, that's fine. But they're articulated, so we need to add in a whole bunch more. Because each of these new segments we're adding is going to be a place where the tentacle bends. So each one is going to have at least 12 segments. That also gives us more polygon space to detail when we get to sculpting. Now the one last thing that we need to do, we need to select all of these vertexes that are supposed to be on or near the bottom. Hit F12, and we're going to set that Z to 0, and the Z height to 0%. Oop, wrong way. That's yeah, undo scale, Y height. There we go. Now, we're going to select everything here. We're going to add in only one. And we're going to lower it near the bottom. The reason I added in this extra edge loop here is because this way when I add mesh smooth to increase its polygon count, it stays relatively flat to the ground. Now, this is the basic geometry we're going to start with. From here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to export this into a format where I can load it into ZBrush. In this case, we're going to export it into OBJ format. Export. Selected. And you can't see this because it doesn't like showing you these, but Dark Young. I've got to do a little bit of jumbly here. It's kind of complex as to why. Desktop Dark Young. There we go. And I'm going to save it in the sculpts directory as an OBJ as Dark Young. Export. Done. Yay! I delete it now. There's a reason. Now, next thing I do, I go ahead and I bring it into ZBrush. See, look, there's that nice little star here. And of course, as usual, I now have to import it. Yes, there is a program called, or a plugin for both Macs and ZBrush called GoZ. I don't like it. It's a personal thing. I just have never had good results. And here we have our Dark Young base geometry. And as usual, you can see the polygons because ZBrush doesn't smooth it without you going through a few hoops. Now, he is radially symmetrical. But up top, he has 6 poles. And on bottom, he has 3. It is possible to do symmetric sculpting in ZBrush on a radial. But I don't like it for something like this. This needs to be off-center, off-kilter, warped, twisted, strange. So let's go ahead and give it one more level of divide. And let's go ahead and delete that. This becomes our bottom layer. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to be sculpting on various weird things around. Yeah, don't ask what that was. Various weird things around the base of the tentacles. these things are not, I repeat, not going to be parts of the tentacles, but they're going to be all sorts of weird geometry. So we're going to take what's called the snake hook brush. I keep forgetting it. Snake hook. We're going to shrink the brush. We're just going to grab random polygons. Oh, too big. I'm just going to grab random polygons and drag them out so that they form spikes. Oh. Basically, each one of these is like a failed tentacle. It didn't quite grow enough to get the full tentacularity that it needed. And it also helps us fill that space in between them. And give it a bit more of a horrific overall look. And less symmetrical look. Now, I zoom out, I can see that I've missed a few spots, but that's okay. Alright, and here's a good one. And then I can also see that in the center, I've missed something. There's nothing in the center. So, let's move it down. Oh, that's good, because what we're going to do in the center is we're going to dig in. And let's go ahead and turn off lazy mouse for this. We're going to Z-sub and focal shift to be sharp. And we're going to shrink our brush. And basically, there's going to be a small little divot in the center of our dark young that the tentacles surround. And this is not going to be a mouth. We're not sure what it is, because the dark young have mouths all around their outsides. And hit smooth and smooth that just a little bit. And hit frame. Yeah. Now, we now have to do the legs. Now, what we can do is, I'm going to base the legs geometry roughly on kind of a semi-human anatomy, just because it would look a little bit more horrific, because the more human things are, the more horrible they are. I'm going to grab and drag up. It's going to be somewhat human, but also somewhat weird. And by doing what I'm doing now, I'm giving it a little bit more asymmetry. Things aren't quite the same. Now this will make it a little bit more difficult for me to rig when it comes time, but oh well. Now, with the standard, back to an add and shrink it down, or shrink the focal length back to 0, and shrink the intensity. We're going to add on a little bit of a knee. With a shin. Yeah. Then we're going to add a thigh bulge, or not thigh, that little inner thigh bulge, but we're going to add it on both sides. And right up here is a central bulge. Let's move this over and tighten it. We're going to smooth out right here. Okay. Go back to standard, and we're going to make it bigger, and we're going to add on a kind of a muscular bulge here and here. And then it's going to have a butt cheek. This is a butt cheek for a monster. Basically a muscle that controls adduction, pulling back. Okay. Then we're going to add in calf muscles, because it needs calves. Oh god, no, not calves, because this is the spawn of the black goat of the wood with 1,000 young. And so if it had calves, its own little spawn, that would be kind of horrific, wouldn't it? Now you notice that I am at a relatively small, I'm at relatively large resolution. The shapes are just what I'm working on here. There's not a lot of detail involved. That's because the larger the detail, like in this case the basic shapes for the muscles, the worse things get if you try to, if you're trying to do major shapes on a very, very high resolution figure, you're going to get problems. You're going to get your shapes not working right, and they're going to look lumpy. Instead, what you do is you make your major shapes on a low resolution model, and then as you go up in detail for the sculpting, then you go ahead and go up in resolution for the brain fart. You go up in resolution for the figure as you go up in, the level of detail for what you're trying to sculpt. So like I said, we're sitting here and we're sculpting the basic muscle shapes that you're going to need on a leg for a tripod-shaped creature. Twistable muscles and side-to-sides. And monster buttocks. Trilobed buttocks. It is a trilobed buttocks, yes. And then the calves, and by this I mean the muscle, not the critters. I pity any calf that has to deal with this creature. It is a creature. And there. And the end result is currently actually a lot less purely geometric. But we need to give it even more because the top where the tentacles are coming from is still looking very geometric. So we're going to get our move tool again. We're going to make it bigger. I'm just going to drag some bits down and other bits up. To the side a little bit. And bring this over. Bring that up a bit. Move. Bring some areas of the middle up. Once again. grab and drag up. And I'm going to grab there. Let's grab here and drag it up. Frame. It's a lot less geometric. Yay! Let's divide it once. We're not going to erase this lower subdivision, because what we're going to do real quick, we're going to shrink this. We're going to smooth out where the tentacles meet the torso. Make it less of an edge. More of a blend. Because one of the key things is we don't want sharp edges in a organic sculpt. So once we've gotten a nice little blend here, it looks like we got them all. Yeah, it's a lot more organic looking now. The tentacles themselves will of course be individually sculpted. Some of them will have suction cups, some of them will have nodules, and some of them will have blades. But there's one primary feature we're missing here. We're missing a mouth. Or multiple mouths. Myths. Moothes. Mythies. So, what we need to do, we need to go ahead and let's bring it up that subdivision level we just added. And we're going to find an area to give it a nice good gash. Slash. That's the one we're going to be using. Let's shrink the size a little and increase the strength. We're going to give it a deep slash. And then we use, if we tap 1, it goes over it again. So doing hitting 1 twice gives us a really deep gash for the mouth. And we're going to do something similar over here, but it's going to be innately bent. And then over here, we're going to do a vertical. No, we better not, because that could be mistaken for something that we don't want on an unnatural critter. Now, at this point in time, we really need to give those mouths more geometry. So what we're going to do is we're not going to divide. We're going to delete the lower. We're going to divide it once or twice just to give it a basic shape and delete lower. We're now at 1.5 million polygons. We don't want that. Dynamesh. Dynamesh rearranges polygon flow. See, if we look in and we zoom in, we'll see that the polygons are pretty even on the tentacles. We come down here and we'll see, like, right in here you can see how they're stretched out. And if we look inside the mouth, we'll see even more stretching. By giving it a Dynamesh, let's say 512, it's going to give us a more evenly distributed polygons, but that's about the resolution we want. This is not the polygon flow we're going to keep, because what we're going to keep will come much later. It's going to become what's called Z-Remaster. Z-Remaster. Z-Remesher. Meh. Now, we're going to move to topological. The reason being is we're going to make the edges of the mouths more or less, a bit more organic looking. See, come to more of a point. Do this on all 3 of the mouths. We're also going to make them not quite as open at the front. Once again, this is something that's going to be asymmetrical. It's just by its nature, while it is technically radially symmetrical in its most basic shape, we want it to be unnatural. We want it to not look symmetric. We want it to look weird. Now, that is our basic mouth shapes. There's actually something we're going to do before this is finished. That we're going to be taking it back into ZBrush, back into 3D Studio Max. We're going to be creating inner mouth geometry for the sucker. Now, we're going to go to Inflate, and we're going to give it lips. And I don't mean pretty lips. I mean just something that helps the mouth stay closed. And don't forget, we're going to smooth the sides of these inflates to try to make them blend a bit better with the geometry around it, so that it doesn't seem to just, kind of sprout out of nowhere, but rather kind of flow from what's there. That's that mouth, the basic lippy lips. Notice how this mouth already looks more like a mouth, whereas this one looks just like a slash. So, we're going to go ahead and inflate around. Give it a bit more, another load. Yeah. And then we're going to blend in the edges of these inflates just so that they look, again, they look more like they're actually coming out of the critter and not just slapped on, or a bad silicone prosthetic that's got poorly blended edges. And let's rotate again. Right. We got 2 mouths and a slash. Oh, this mouth, I don't know why, but it's not, I'm not feeling it. Let's blend that a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. That's a bit better. And now we have one more slash. Zoom in. And this one's going to arc down with its little upper lip mustache shaped thingy. They're all 3 different. They all eat different things, yeah. Yeah, this one only eats the souls of, 28-year-old would-be television executives. I don't know. The other 2 only eat, well, the one to the left of it only eats souls of extremely snarky waitresses that aren't as good as the ones I normally get, because I actually usually get good service most of the places I go, but I see people complaining about snarky waitresses, so I figure there must be some out there somewhere. And the third one is lactose intolerant, so it just doesn't eat dairy. And we are getting our basic shape mostly done, but we want the muscles are still looking kind of vague. So we're going to go back to slash. We're going to lower the intensity, increase the size a little, and we're basically going to go ahead and we need to increase the size and lower the intensity. Basically going to go in and draw the edges of them. As you can see, just by doing a nice light stroke over, we're adding in some further muscular definition to these things, which is a scary thought. Imagine one of the spawn of Shub Nigarauth going to the gym, getting swole. Yo, dude, like, do you even drain souls, dude? Yeah, like, dude, I can lift like 4,000 metric ectoplasm tons. What about you, dude? Have you any, you got any major dude things and dude bro, sports ball, whatever? Yeah. As I completely lost what I was trying to go for. But yeah, just great old ones going to the gym, getting, working out, getting ripped. What would they use for steroids? Because, they don't have the same kind of biomuscular processes as a living thing. Would they use, like, the souls of particularly strong-willed people? Because it's their strength. Would they use, cotton candy? No. Okay. Those muscles are getting better. And then one last leg. Hey! Oh, this one's got a strong one. And hello, whoever is in here. I guess that would be, just me. Somebody lurking. Okay. Oh. Yes, you caught me rambling on deliriously about great old ones going to the gym. And just, what would they use? Instead of creatin, it'd be creation. Yeah, that'd be kind of weird. Alright, that's the muscles frame. We're also going to go ahead and give each shin just, it's a random side, which one is going to be the left or the right. And let's make this one now. And then we're going to go back to the inflate tool. We're going to shrink it a bit. We're going to go ahead and add in just a bit on the shin, just to make the shins a bit more shinny. Now, this is our stumpy-legged, over-muscle-legged creatures. We need to add something above some kind of weird detail above the mouths. Let's just make them weird bumps. Little warts. And a couple down here too. Hey, I got zits. I'm a spawn of a great old one, but I gotta use Clearasil. So yeah, it's puberty happens to everybody, even the gods of the outer darkness. Sorry. Yeah, it's a bit more organic looking. And that is the basic geometry for our beasties. The thing is, right now we have 235,000 polygons. And what we need to do is we need to go ahead and we need to add in some what are called Z-remesher guides. Okay? Now, let's figure out. We're going to go ahead, we're going to shrink the brush size, because what we need to do, the only things we need to really worry about right now is we need to make loops around the mouths. The reason being is because mouths are not slits. There is nothing on the human body that is actually a slit. Even eyelids have a loop geometry to them. And yes, this isn't human, but we want to make it a believable, unnatural horror from beyond the stars. So we're giving it at least a vague sort of anatomy. And then we bring this over. And we add in there. Now the next thing we need to add in, we can up the brush size. We need to draw loops around the base of each leg. The reason being, we want each leg to be nicely divided up at the thigh and the knee. The ankle will follow. Divide at the knee and the ankle will follow. That sounds like some kind of weird tactical advice for fighting monsters. You know? Divide at the knee and the ankle. Well, that one's bent. And it's hard to see from your point of view, but it's basically it folded back on itself for some reason. That rarely happens. But when it does, it happens twice in a row. Okay. Basically, what these guides are is when I do... when I do the remeshing, these guides are to tell it, basically, we want to make cuts here. So we want to make sure that the polygons flow along these lines. As you can see, there's a cut at the ankle and or the knee and the thigh. Now, most of what we're going to do with the mouth is we're actually going to make the geometry for the mouth in 3D Studio Max again, so that we will have a bit more control over it. Yeah, see, I'm not having that same problem with the falling back on itself here as I did at on the other leg. Okay. And then we're going to go around this leg. Oh, nope, we don't want it to do that. It was what follow. No. What's happening is I'm accidentally hitting one of the buttons on the stylus, so let's go ahead and adjust my thumb position. Okay. And then the last knee. This is the injured one. It's the wounded knee. And it's got an arrow in the knee. And that's that. Now, frame. Zoom in. This is the front of the critter. And we're going to turn off Dynamesh and we're going to Z remesher. Now, we want it to follow the adaptive size and curve strength all at maximum. And then it's kind of random what the actual poly count ends up after you do target poly count. So let's go ahead and see what the base 5 does. By the way, I'm now putting my tablet back in its position. And it's Z remesh progress, escape key to abort. And it's hitting a bit of a sag. Okay, that is your basic geometry. It ended up 56,000 triangles, 50,000 polygons, and it looks pretty good. And if you'll notice, when we look at the geometry of, say, these muscles, let's turn on line fill. You'll see that very often, not all the time, but a lot of the time, the polygon lines, the edge loops, follow the lines of the muscles. Let's turn it back off, frame it again, and we're going to export dark young, no mouths. Okay. Now, the reason we went ahead and we stopped it in ZBrush here, this is what the basic exterior will look like. So, we need to turn back on 3D Studio Max. Hey. And I'll tell you right now, the program does not come up that fast. It's been working in the background. I am on a 7-year-old computer. A 7-year-old computer. And I currently have, or I have in the past had, 3D Studio Max, ZBrush, DAZ Studio, Craftware, Pronterface, although, no, I have to have Pronterface on, like, Discord, and then like 6-7 different tabs and windows of Firefox. Yeah. So, we're going to go ahead and file import, and we're going to import, where is it, Dark Young, Sculpt, Dark Young No Mouths, and import them. And it's going to import as groups. That means is, you'll notice that they're each different colors. Well, coincidentally, each one of these mouths is a color. What that means is I can select the mouths independently, which is good because I need to, and delete each one of these mouths. Now, I have deleted the mouths. I'm going to select the upper torso, which right now is the only thing left, and I'm going to hide first the little frozen person, and then the legs. I am then going to select all of these tentacles that are above the mouths. Oh, I forgot. It's shading all of the polygons. And then I'm going to hide those. I'm then going to change the rendering method to not shade faces. And here we have our mouths. Each one slightly open. And what I'm going to do for each of these, I'm going to select, let's start with the one in the back. I select that mouth, and I'm going to convert it to just regular edges. I'm going to chamfer about a millimeter will do. And then I'll select just the edge again. I will shrink it a little. And I will move it inside. Now, I will do the same thing again. And chamfer, about an inch, yes. Or rather, a millimeter, I should say. And reselect that. And we bring it back in a bit more. Shrink it down mostly. And lower it a bit. And then shrink it overall a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. Now let me go ahead and turn around and show you what it actually is looking like now. Now you'll notice we've got a problem in the geometry that I can already see right here. Let's turn on the edge faces. Okay, yeah, we've got a problem in the geometry right at the corner of the mouth there. I'm going to go ahead and clear that out while I can. And that's mostly because of this vertex right here. So we're going to move back in, and we're going to move it up, and we're going to move it out. Yeah. Now when I turn off that, and I turn off the edge faces, I don't get that weird shading there anymore. Now, this mouth needs a bit more inner mouth, but at this point we can actually start making it a little bit less, a little bit larger polygons. So let's go ahead. We're going to be doing this for all three of the mouths. And at this point, we're actually going to start increasing the size, especially the height. And we're going to deselect these, and we're going to start splitting the upper from the lower. And now I'm going to deselect what we just had selected, and it's going to go down. It's still wide, but it's down. Now we're going to, once again, chamfer! Yay! And select. We're going to move it in a bit more, but now it's going to shrink this way and grow this way a bit. We're going to deselect these uppers and move the lower down quite a lot more. Then we're going to reselect them, and we're going to deselect the lowers and move the uppers up quite a bit more. Looking at it from the back side, it's starting to create a box, which is pretty much all we really need. Now we're going to go ahead and chamfer and select, move it in. We're going to leave it there at the height. We're going to go ahead and make it smaller, and one last chamfer. Okay, select the edge, and this time we're going to collapse it. And we're going to select the vertex that is at the very back. We're going to move it a little bit further back to the back just to make sure that it all ends up smoothing out. Now the next thing we're going to do, we have 3 large edge loops that are very, what's the word I'm looking for? They're by themselves. They're lonely. So we're going to loop. We're going to chamfer them. This time not just 1 millimeter, but a lot of millimeters. What this does is this basically just makes our little box, the inside of that mouth, a smoother shape, a smoother, rounder shape. There is a problem right back there, but it's not going to matter because this is an unnatural mouth. Alright, that is the mouth. Okay. Now, there's really not much more I can do right now that y'all would find interesting at all, apparently, because I chased off the only person that was watching. Yay! Makes me feel like I'm a star. That's where, ready for the Academy Awards. So what I'm going to go ahead and unhide unhide everything, and unhide the tentacles, just so you can get a decent view. This is what the critter looks like right now. The next time I'm probably going to show anything on it, it will have all sorts of weird things going on with it. The tentacles will have details. There will be an unusual texture to the body, and it'll be even teeth in the mouth. So guess I'll go ahead and yeah. Nobody's listening. Nobody's watching. Nobody cares. So, but I guess that what I can do is just sit here and wait until I can see myself on screen, and when I do, I say bye-bye. Okay? So, I'm going to get a 5, I'm going to get a 4, I'm going to get a 3, I'm going to get a 2, and I'm going to get a 1.